Grab those holy books, everybody. We're getting biblical on this episode of Beyond the Borderline with your host, Connor, Cam, Phil, and Ryan.
Love the enthusiasm, Connor, for the Almighty.
Very nice.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we may as well dive into it. So as Connor alluded to so eloquently there, we'll be discussing today a topic which we've touched on many times and which is among the most controversial probably ever, which is God real? Does God exist? Whatever your conception of God might be, this conversation won't necessarily be limited by reference to, the Christian God or
We're just
or
talking
the-
about a higher power, baby.
a higher power, a creator entity. I suppose if we were to place any definitions on God, it would just be the simple, omniscient, omnipresent, all-knowing,
Creator
all
of
powerful, creator of all. Yeah. So we likely have some diverging viewpoints on this question. So I think I'll come in and defend my point of view after the others mount their own arguments. So whoever wants to take it away, take it away.
Is God real?
That's the question.
I
yeah.
believe that God is real.
Okay.
I know Ryan may disagree.
Whoa! Why am I being pointed out as the cynic?
Because this is actually an intervention. We're here to convince you.
Oh, okay. So I'm the only. Well, I mean, my answers might actually surprise you because I've actually taken some time to reevaluate my position. But anyways, Connor, continue.
Oh, he's discovered. He's discovered.
No, I
the
wouldn't
Lord.
say I found God or anything like that.
How
Good
convenient.
God, you're open to the idea now.
Yes, I'm open to the idea.
Nice. I
Yeah.
like that. Hey,
Okay, well, we need to
it's a
have
marathon,
some.
not a sprint here. But anyway, so back to the main thing, I guess, is like, whether it doesn't really matter what God you believe in. I think divine intervention happens. Personally, I've never experienced it, but I know many people have or say they have. I think that's, proofs in the pudding right there.
Wait, give some examples of what you're referring to. Like, I know what you mean by that, obviously, but like, go into it a bit.
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot here. Who's had divine intervention?
Yeah.
Well,
It can be
like,
it can be anecdotal, if you know people, but
I was watching Untold, that series on Netflix about different like sporting events, different athletes and stuff like that.
right.
And it was called like Deal with the Devil. And it was about a lady named Christy who was like a boxer, best boxer ever. And she ends up like she's like the best female boxer ever on this planet. And it turns out that her husband's like her husband / trainer is like abusing her, like beating her out. Like, well, first it started off as like mental abuse, like just kind of like controlling, manipulating, that sort of thing. And then she she decided one day, okay, I'm gonna leave him. So she leaves him, and then he tracks her down, finds her, brings her back, and he's talking on the phone with someone one day, and then he comes in and starts beating the crap out of her. And she gets stabbed a couple times, and then she actually got shot as well.
Jeez.
But her fight or flight instinct, she was like praying, like, God, please save me, God, please save me. And then like, she was able to get out of the house, get into a car, and someone brought her to the hospital, and she made like a full recovery.
So your idea,
I think that's
God,
like divine intervention being like a lot of people, might have died in that situation, but that was like, she was like, that was like, I was saved that day.
Yeah. So
Both in the literal and like metaphysical sense.
So you're of the opinion that like God actually intervenes in the affairs of men in the world, because well, two things. A skeptic, and I'm not necessarily saying I agree with this, but a skeptic would say like it could just be purely chance or luck. And people wanting to believe in God makes them obviously more disposed to attribute their successes to God. And there's also the idea of God kind of being a passive being, like not necessarily willing or able to intervene in the actual individual lives of people. But yeah, I don't know what you think about that.
I don't know. I think there's lots of like different ways of taking it, and you can't really say like, oh, this is just a one-off, or this is like, it's like, oh, God doesn't exist because this could happen. But I think, on the other side of the coin, people like look at these, non-human interactions or events where it's like a normal person or most people would not be able to survive this circumstance or would not be able to make it out,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
alive.
I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about that whole thing. Like I believe in God, but my idea of him is kind of more as a creator of the universe, and he laid down these fundamental foundations for the universe and for human nature and stuff. And then human nature is like the code that he wrote, and then everything else that happens is kind of just happens, and he doesn't necessarily get involved.
What about like guardian angels and that sort of thing? Like, would you believe in guardian angels?
Maybe. I
Because
don't know.
that would be, a form of God existing as these guardian angels, these higher beings, that work in favor or work in the directive of God or this higher power or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever you call it, like that's what kind of like the guardian angel or I mean, there's definitely many different names for different like sects and religions and all that good stuff, but
Yeah.
it's these non-human entities working to help people.
Yeah. It's hard to believe in that, but I'm definitely open to the possibility. But I think the strongest arguments are in favor of God are the intelligent design arguments. So one of those is just, you look at our planet itself, and this ties into the question of, do aliens exist, and are humans a uniquely intelligent species, and is Earth a uniquely habitable planet in the universe? And that's certainly up for debate. But the fact of the matter is, as far as we know, Earth is not only the only place with intelligent life, but the most perfect habitat for intelligent life as well. The fact, all the things that had to coincide to make this whole place possible. We sit in a perfect zone in orbit around the sun where the temperature is exactly perfect, what we need. The mix of oxygen and other gases that comprise our atmosphere, exactly what we need. The presence of fresh water, the renewable resources that we have. Just the you look at any other planet in our solar system, any other planet that we've observed, and you don't see that. And so it lends credence to the idea that Earth was designed specifically by an intelligent creator to be the home of us, if you look at us as the children of God or whatever. But
Have you ever heard of the perfect storm though?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, obviously just the same, but like the perfect storm is like
You're saying
if
it's
everything
chance.
everything in the world is possible of happening, this is just one of those possibilities that we're fortunate
Yeah,
enough to be a part of.
certainly. Yeah, certainly. And that's a compelling idea. But there's more to it. So it's not only that Earth is is perfectly designed and suited for us, but the entire universe itself, one of the questions that science still hasn't come to a conclusion on is how exactly did the universe start? We have the idea of the Big Bang, but what caused that, right? Well, it was, this massive release of energy and these particles in motion, and everything kind of exploded from a singular point and then snowballed from there. Well, what caused that? Everything has to have a cause in the universe, right? According to the laws of physics. And so there's still no actual explanation for that. There's theories, of course. And actually, that would make a really cool episode, because one of the theories is that like the generation of a new universe comes after the death of an old one. But even that idea, you have to go back to the beginning, and it's like, well, what created
the first universe?
And so,
and what will end the last one?
Yeah, and well, yeah.
Unless it's
so
just on loop.
Yeah, it's not only that Earth is perfect, and that something had to have caused the creation of the universe, but also that the universe follows laws, like the laws of physics and math, being a universal language, a universal constant, truths that apply throughout the universe. We kind of take that for granted, but we can't really explain that. Again, you can say chance, and we just happen to be the product of chance, and everything works because it works. It happened to work out like this. But just the fact that there is a set of laws to the universe can imply that there was someone who wrote those laws. You know what I mean?
But those laws to the universe were just things that we made up to try and comprehend it.
No, they're not things we made up. They're things we discovered. They're things that are provable through math, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole, you can't destroy energy.
Everything in math is theory, though, right?
No, absolutely not. Math is inherently provable.
Newton's the 3 laws of motions are very much provable.
And so it's like all of these rules of the universe allow everything to exist in space and time, particles to coalesce to form matter. And then eventually, of course, life coming to be, our planet staying in orbit around the sun itself existing and burning and giving life to the earth. Everything, every single thing that exists follows a rule of physics, which can be proven through math, which means that we're not inventing things here. We're actually peeling back the curtain and discovering what's underneath. We're slowly uncovering the framework of the universe. And so then the question obviously is this framework simply there by chance? Or was this framework, which seems too perfect to be true, designed to be perfect by a more powerful being? So I want to hear, as a doubter, I want to hear Ryan's take on that, because I think that is.
Well, I think we should see where Ryan's at right now first, because last time we talked, he did not believe in God. So let's see where he is now. He's open to the idea.
I have never been an atheist. I need to say that right now. I have never been an atheist. I've always been very clear about that. I've always described myself as an agnostic, and I wouldn't stop describing myself that way now. But I've adopted 2 schools of thought, and I've gone down both of them, and I don't know which one to lean towards.
Sure.
So the first school of thought is, if God is real, or if God is not real, then what you're telling me is everything that has happened, everything that has led up to, the creation of man's accomplishments, everything that exists in the world is purely random and there's no purpose. If that is the case, that says to me that life doesn't have very much meaning. Because if everything is random and everything just happened by chance, well, then me being alive right now is just a string of extremely good luck. And if that is truly the case, that would be quite a miserable existence, in my own personal opinion. So that's the one school of thought I've gone down. The other school of thought I've gone down is, well, human beings seem to be so, what's the right word? We seem to be so driven by this idea of meaning, and that if we don't have meaning, we can't have, a successful or happy life. So we're how did I think about this? Yeah, sorry. So if human beings constantly have this need to believe that we have some greater purpose, that we have some greater destiny, that we have some meaning to our lives, and that is what gives us life. It's what gives us purpose. It's what gives us drive. Why I have a problem with this school of thought is this just human arrogance? Are we so arrogant as a human, as a race of intelligent beings, that we can't believe that the reason for our existence is anything but to have some sort of predetermined destiny or predetermined goal? You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yeah.
human beings are so drawn to the idea that we were created for a purpose and we're here to fulfill that purpose. And if that's not the case, then what's the point of living? Those are kind of the two schools of thought I've gone down. Is us believing in God is purely just our confirmation bias so that we can live in denial? Or is it truly, yes, there is a God, everything was created and everything was created to have a purpose, and that is really what gives us meaning in life?
Yeah.
So I've kind of gone down these two schools of thought, and I've thought about them both a lot. And I don't know which one I subscribe to, because yes, I want to believe that there is some cosmic force out there that gave us life, because there are tangible, not tangible, there are intangible, ineffable feelings and emotions that all humans feel across, all cultures. We all have this same kind of, moral compass that I think all of us do have outside of any codified laws. Now, how did human beings get this? This can't just be something that randomly happened to us. This has to be something that was imprinted on the human DNA. That's, that cosmic aspect I'm getting to. But on the other hand, is this just all confirmation bias? Are we just so arrogant as a species that we have to believe, that we have no capacity to not believe that we were designed for some great purpose?
Well, you see,
Now,
a religious person
question.
might I'll hold on, I'll just be quick here. A religious person might say that even human beings, all commonly having this desire to understand and to give meaning to life through the idea of God, is God working through us. You know what I mean? Like one of the more abstract proofs of God's existence is simply the fact that God is trying to reveal himself to us through this burning desire in our minds to understand. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily a strong argument, but if you believe, then you believe. I mean, it is a good question. Why do we have this need to understand like that? Why does every human civilization that's ever come about have a concept of God, have an idea of God?
It is a reoccurring theme that has existed for as long as we've been able to catalog history.
Yeah.
For me, I think I've come to the point now that I believe God exists in a metaphysical sense. Like, the idea of God is what gives God life. So I'm not necessarily saying I believe God is this, guy with a white beard or this cosmic energy force that created everything. But I think God as an idea definitely exists.
Sure. On the Phil, were you
Back to my question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's all good. My question, Ryan, was like, if everything is a chance and people leave, if people did not believe, like, if the human race in general, everyone just said, yeah, God doesn't exist, do you think that there'd be no more innovation, like going way back to like Stone Age sort of thing? Like, even before that, like when we were just tribes, like what's the point of getting to civilization to where it is today if people didn't believe in a purpose, being it of a holy nature or not? I think regardless of your religious or spiritual views, I think you got to look at that.
Question this way: if human beings are so dependent on believing on a greater entity than themselves, and if that entity were suddenly to be proven not to exist, and then humanity would crumble as a result of that. If that is the case, if human beings are really like that, then I would see the human race as a very fragile and frankly pathetic
But
intelligent
people can
race.
also believe in the
no,
greater good too, right? You don't need
that's
to
no,
necessarily
hold on. I just
believe
want to say
in.
that's no insult to anyone that has faith or believes in God. To each his own. I'm always, a supporter of that. But I've always been a big purveyor of believing in yourself and having faith in yourself before you put your faith in, in otherworldly beings. As much as I would love otherworldly beings like God to exist. Now, if for you, if putting faith in yourself is your belief in God, sure, whatever. There's so many different interpretations of how people perceive God. But for me personally, this is why I have such a split view on all this. Is I don't like the idea that some great being specifically handcrafted me or the human race for some specific purpose, because that makes everything feel predetermined. I like the idea.
But that's where what I was saying before about God being a benevolent creator, but not necessarily an involved being.
Right. So my counter to that is, if God is an apathetic, hands-off God, then that is just as worse, because if God created, if you're to take the Christianity, model of God, human beings are created in the image of God, and God wants nothing but good for his creation. If him having a hands-off and apathetic approach to that is good, look at all the terrors that have happened across the human race over its entire existence. If God truly is benevolent, how could he allow his most treasured creations to go through such things? And
hold on. I need to jump in.
Here's
I need to jump
something you
in
can
here.
look at too.
Wait. I really need to jump in here. One thing is that we're not technically even discussing the morality of God himself or the validity of any one religion, and what you just said is something that's often said, but it's not actually a disproof of God's existence. Like,
sure, I don't think I was necessarily getting into that part of it. I was just saying, if God exists and he is so apathetic, that would be a pretty harsh reality to live in. And I can't imagine that the benevolent God that we tend to describe would do that. So maybe
there's
the
also
other
there's
idea
also the
is
belief
that,
in like Satan and the devil and stuff like that working against God to create these tragedies. But
and also
I just had a quick thing to say
beings.
about. I just had a quick thing to say. It was, like a lot of people look at like when you die on Earth, that's like the end. But I guess like there's some people, or whatever you want to say, true believers. I don't know if that's the right word to describe it, but some people believe that when you die, that's the beginning. That's the beginning of heaven. That's the beginning of the afterlife, which is why God created us, was so that we would be able to make it into this,
Other
greater realm.
Yeah. And also the idea that God allows suffering is something that drives people away from religion for sure. And that especially Christianity, because it posits that God truly does care about us. But one thing, Christianity is not the only take on the idea of God, for one thing. And B, if we are looking at Christian teachings and other religions as well, the idea of suffering is that it wasn't God that caused that. It was human beings that caused that. The whole story of the Garden of Eden and the whole story of original sin, it's, first of all, it's not meant to be taken literally. Like, obviously not many people left believe the earth was created like 6,000 years ago, right? But it's an important story as to the beginning of our spiritual nature and how we fell from grace, and all the suffering in the world that exists today can be traced back to that original sin, to the loss of our innocence after Eve ate the fruit from the garden.
Just quickly, because we don't have a lot of time here, I've also considered the aspect of, well, I think suffering is necessary for life, because without suffering, if humans didn't have the capacity to suffer, everything would be too easy. And if everything is too easy, life becomes superfluous.
Exactly.
Those challenges that inspire us to keep going so that we can achieve that good life, that happy and easy life. Without those challenges to get there, it doesn't feel like we've earned it. And human beings are certainly a race of creatures that definitely feel like they need to earn it before they can believe it.
Exactly. Well, you can't appreciate the light without darkness, right? Because then what is it? It's nothing.
Yeah, what is light without darkness? Yeah, it's that whole dichotomy is they're dependent on one another.
Yeah, but then the other thing is I want to come back to the intelligent design argument again, because there's more components of it. So we've looked at the universal laws, we've looked at the perfection of Earth. There's also our DNA sequence. Our DNA and our cells and the cells of all living things are programmed to perform certain functions, and they're programmed exactly to do this, and they fulfill those functions, for the most part. And so again, it's like there's fingerprints all over the universe and all over living beings that says these were designed. DNA, it's a code. I mean, it literally is a code, right, to a computer, and that's not naturally generated, or it seems like, even if you're a logical,
Unless you're in a
rational
simulation.
person. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, Connor, it seems like a simulation.
but unless, even if you're a rational person who hates the idea of God, you still have to grapple with that idea. So what is your explanation? What is your explanation for the fact that there are inherent laws to the universe, that there's genetic code that programs all living beings, and that human beings and our rationality, our intelligence, the extreme complexity and minutia of our brains, how did that come to be as well? I mean, we are extremely unique in terms of life in the world, and there is still no solid explanation of why and how that was able to happen. And so whatever your idea of God is, the intelligent design argument, I think, is just that puts it over the top for me. Is like, I don't have an answer to that. How can there be no creator when we see all of this complexity before us that had to have been designed by someone?
We're gonna have to
Also,
make this a two-parter.
I think we
Yeah, I
should.
think we're gonna make this a two-parter here. So stay tuned for the next episode next week, guys. In the meantime, take care, brush your hair. If you're not subscribed to YouTube, subscribe to YouTube.